Good morning, Rabbi Isai. I see these guys have no idea. Rabbi Isai, we're holding the Kufi Ches on the base. Some very gishmaka stuff, things that we're not so familiar with. These are topics that we don't really discuss a lot in Shas, and that's the beauty of Daf Yomi. We touch on so many different topics and things that you've never even imagined. Omar Abchia Barashi, Omar Rav. We're smack in the middle of Kufi Ches on the base. Yesh yad letuma ve'ein yad lehechsher. So we're talking about a handle. The handle is a conduit for tuma. So if tuma touches this part, it goes through the handle, even though this is not meat, and goes and touches the meat, it makes the meat tummy. If the meat is tummy to begin with, it'll exit through the handle and make whatever touches the handle tummy. So it goes in both directions. Nichnas and yoitza. Nichnas yoitza. So that's the handle. Says Rav, yesh yad letuma ve'ein yad lehechsher. We know in order for fruit, meat, to become tummy, they need to be mukhshir l'kabel tumah. You have to activate the tumah properties. How do you activate tumah? By sprinkling it with one of the 7 liquids: water, dew, honey, blood, etc. What if you sprinkle the water on this part of the meat, on the handle part? So Rav says it doesn't work. Ein yad lehechsher. Rabbi Yochanan Amar yesh yad letuma ulehechsher. The handle works for both, for tumah to come in and out, and also if you sprinkle water on this, then the rest of the meat becomes mukhshir l'kabel tumah. So if a dead rat touches this part, even though the water only touched this part, it's tummy. So we have a machlokes whether the handle is from mukhshir l'kabel tumah. What's the source of the machlokes? Very simple. Ibaisem svaram, the arguing either in logic, Ibaisem mikra, or the arguing what the pasuk says. Ibaisem mikra. If it's the pasuk, so let me just show you the pasuk real quickly, and it's beautiful. It says like this: V'chiyutan mayim al zera. This is the pasuk of putting water on seeds to make them susceptible to tumah. V'nafal min nevlasam alav, and tumah touched them. Tamei hu lachem. This is the pasuk, the last 3 words in red. That's what we learn. The idea of the concept of yad, of a handle. Take a look at this. Boom. The first part of the pasuk talks about hechsher l'kabel tumah. The second part of the pasuk talks about tumah. The third part of the pasuk talks about a handle. Machlokes is, could you learn the first part of the pasuk from the last part of the pasuk? Because it's like a chatzitz in between. There's a hefsek. This is the v'nafal min v'lasam is not what we're trying to learn. We're trying to see, are you mukhshir l'kabel tumah? Is it the idea of being mukhshir l'kabel tumah? Could we learn it from could it happen through a handle? Could you learn the purple from the red? It's once removed. There's blue in between. That's the shaila. So the Gemara says, Mar savar mikra nidrash lefanov v'loy lifnei fanav. I'm going to learn blue from red, but not purple from red, because it's lifnei fanav. It's before, it's twice, it's once removed. Mar savar mikra nidrash lefanov v'lifnei fanav. I can learn something, the beginning of the pasuk to the end of the pasuk, even though there's another topic in between, the topic of tumah. Okay, so that's one way of learning the machlokes. Another way to say is that they're arguing logic. The way to get to tumah, in order to make a piece of meat tumah or fruit tumah, you have to sprinkle water on it. So the sprinkle of water is part of the process of tumah, so to speak. And therefore, when the Torah talks about a yad, and we know yad, the handle, tumah goes through the handle in both directions. Therefore, it's also good, the handle is also good to be susceptible to tumah through sprinkling with water, because it's part of the tumah process. No, it's not true. It's not the beginning of tumah. It makes you susceptible to tumah. It's not the beginning of tumah. It says mamish mefurish like Rabbi Yochanan. Now what? That the handle is good for tumah, and it's also good to make it susceptible to tumah. Just like fruit cannot become tamei if it's attached to the ground, and they say, you're trying to say, Imagine if fruit became tame when it was attached to the ground. So almost all your wheat would be tame before it came to the store because the dead chariots is everywhere and be touching shratzim all the time. And of course, to be susceptible to tumah, to sprinkle water on it, it has to be detached from the ground or from the tree. Okay, next sugya. Omarav, you don't need a Gemara now. Ein yad lepachas mekazayis. Okay, this obviously is more than a kazayis. This is a great handle. But what about this cherry right over here? This handle that I'm holding right over here, is this a handle for tumah? Could tumah enter here if a dead cherry touches this? Would it go to the rest of the cherry, make the cherry tumah? What's the problem? Because it's less than a kazayis. Let's say it's small. Rav says no, it doesn't work. If it's less than a kazayis, it doesn't work. So holding like 7 lines from the bottom, 6-7 lines from the bottom. Omer Rav, ein yad lepachas mekazayis. And Rashi explains we're talking about a bunch of cherries, a bunch of these guys, and together we have a kibetza, yeah? More than 2. Here, a bunch like this. And we're talking about each one individually. Could tumah travel through the stem? You need at least a kibetza for tumah to happen at all. So you have a kibetza. But each one with the stem is less than a kibetza, less than even a kazayis. That's halacha number 1. So yesterday, the day before, the whole parak, we're discussing 2 things. We're talking about the handle, and we're talking about the shomer. A shomer, where's my shomer here? Oh, chasna is shomer. This is a shomer. A shomer means a protector, like skin on meat. The skin is a protector. Like a shell of a nut is a protector to the nut. So the protector could be added to the volume of whatever we're talking about. So let's say we're talking about a nut. So you need a kibetza. So together with the protector, you have a kibetza. Good, you got a kibetza, but it's not edible. But it's a protector, and a protector is considered part of the food more so than the handle. The handle is less than a protector because you don't need a handle. It's not necessary for the food. You won't have any food without a protector. It wouldn't exist, right? You wouldn't have an apple if it didn't have a peel. It would spoil. So the shomer is very important, and therefore it's considered part of the food for tumah. However, he says ve'ein shomer lefachos mikafail full foil. In other words, if you have a very small, like in this case, you have a tiny little bean inside. Over here you have multiple, but if you have one and you have a giant protector, that's not good. That doesn't give you a shear. Why? Because you need at least a half a kazayis. A foil is a half a zayis, you need a half a zayis. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, yesh yad lepachas mekazayis. Let's put it all together here. Here we go. That what Rav says, for a handle you need at least a kazayis. And Rabbi Yochanan says you need a foil. For a shomer, Rav says you need a foil, and Rabbi Yochanan says you don't need anything. Any size is enough for the shomer to be part of it. Ein yad lepachas mekazayis, ve'ein shomer lepachas mekfoil. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, yesh yad lepachas mekazayis, yesh shomer lepachas mekfoil. Okay. Yeah, Joe. It's good, or again, Nachamal. Rav says that if something's really small, then the handle doesn't work. How small? Less than a kazayis. And Rabbi Yochanan says no. It could be even a foil. It could be one foil. One. It's a, what is it called? Lava bean. Fava bean. Right, fava bean. Meisvei. In order to ask a question, we're going to go into a great situation, a very, very interesting shiloh. Listen to this. I'm going to say balpet, and I'll show you a video. It's going to be very clear. There's a bone, just a bone, and on the bone there's a half a kazayis. Now imagine if there's a whole kazayis of a dead man's flesh, which a kazayis is enough to make a whole house tameh. If you had a kazayis of dead meat here in the house, the whole house would become tameh with the oil. So listen to the question. The meat is outside of the house, outside the door, but the bone, just the bone part, extends into the house. Does the meat, the tum of the meat, transfer through the bone into the house and make the whole house tummy? Now, in our case, it's two bones, and each bone has a half a shear, half a kazayis and half a kazayis, going into the house. It says over here that it's tummy. Now, what's the question? I'll just say the question. It's a very simple question. According to Rav, we just said that if you have less than a kazayis, and that's the case of the bone with the meat, this handle doesn't work at all. So if it doesn't work at all, how does the tuhuma transfer from outside the door into the house? The handle doesn't work. The handle only works when you have a minimum of a kazayis. And in our case, you have a half a kazayis plus a half a kazayis. Two half a kazayisim on a bone. Let me show you this video the guy did. Our guys, we have in-house guys, right? 7 of them. So the tuma from outside the house went into the house through the handle, but the handle is not a handle because it only have a kazayis. What's going on here? And they went into the house, and the house is creating oil. Oh, we're just talking about the oil from the Rebbe. Habayis Tomei. Yehuda ben Akoisa Mishum Rebbe Yaakov. Yehuda ben Akoisa argues, he says, no, two bones don't get together to make a full kazayis. Says the Gemara, V'Rav, hi, b'may moikim lo. What's going on here? So Rav says there's two halachas that Rav said. First of all, a half a kazayis, less than a kazayis, the handle doesn't work. And if it's less than a foil, less than this lava bean, then it doesn't work as a protector. Now, it doesn't say here why these bones, how these bones are operating. It doesn't say if they're operating as a handle, or perhaps they're operating, there's one other thing a bone could be. What else could a bone be? A protector. Protector of what? Of the bone marrow inside the bone. Every bone has marrow, almost every bone. A lot of bones have marrow, so perhaps it's a protector. And once it's a protector, it's more than a kazayis. So says Gemara, Rav, what's the situation here? Ibiyad, if we're talking about a handle, so in other words, talking about a bone that doesn't have marrow, it's only acting as a handle, kasher reisha. So I don't understand the Tanakama. Here, check this out. This is the case on the bottom. Two bones. Now the reisha in this case doesn't mean reisha, it means like the Tanakama, the first shita. Tanakama says that half and half of a kazayis, two halves of a kazayis, the tumah transfers into the house. It's as if you have a whole kazayis in the house. The problem is, as I explained, that a half a kazayis is not a handle at all. How do you have a handle for the transfer to happen? I have enough meat, fine, I'll give it to you. We have two halves of kazayisim, that's a full kazayis of meat. But how does it transfer? There's not enough conduit for the electric, so to speak, for the tumah to go from outside of the house into the house through the bone. It's not a real handle. That's the problem. Even shomer, and if you're going to tell me that the problem is that we're talking about not a handle, but we're talking about a bone that's a protector and it's acting as a shomer, kasha seifa, that will be a problem with Yehuda ben Akaisa, because Yehuda ben Akaisa says that for a shomer to apply, you need a kazayis, and over here you don't have a kazayis. So the Gemara says, great. And that you might be thinking about the answer, because we're trying to say that it fits to both the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda ben Akaisa. Not true. We're going to fit it into one sheet, and then therefore you could say it's talking about either a shomer or a yad. How? By the way, if you don't get it now, we're going to do the same sugi again in 10 seconds. We're going to do the same thing basically over. Same idea. We're talking about that this handle is really a shomer. Or no, we're talking about a handle and not a shomer. We're talking about a handle. That what Rav, who says that there's no handle that's less than a kazayis, you're right. He agrees that in this case of the truck bringing 2 bones in, the house is going to be tar, not tameh. Or no, we're talking about that the bone is acting as a protector. And he holds that the house is tameh. Now we go to Rabbi Yochanan. No good. Keep on going. Oh. Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says, Yesh yad l'pachas m'kazayis. There is a handle that's less than a kazayis, and there is a shomer less than a foil. In other words, we explained less than a foil means it doesn't need a shear at all. So, how are we going to explain? Rabbi Yochanan kula biyad. We're talking about a handle, and it works perfectly with the Tanakama that you don't need a kazayis. What was the whole question? If you have 2 half a kazaysim, so how does the handle work? It's not going to work. The answer is it does work according to the Mandam. It says that you don't need a full kazayis. Toshma, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, koilis sheyesh kazayis bas. What's a koilis? Here we got a koilis. It's a very large bone in the animal, right by its thigh. Femur, thank you. And we have a Geshmaka video to show you what the femur is. And this has to do with the Gemara, because the Gemara says that it's a protector. What is it protecting? The bone marrow. Check this out.
Take that, roast that up, you have some beautiful beef bone marrow.
So koilos. So now we're doing the same sugya all over again. Same thing that we just did. 5 more lines, same idea. If this giant femur has 1 piece of meat on it, so anywhere you touch this piece of this bone, let's say this is the femur. You have a piece of meat just right over here, and Tumah touches over here, it transfers to the whole thing. Tumah touches over here, it transfers this way. That's all he's saying. The whole thing becomes tumah no matter where you touch it. So let's see this inside here. Here, we just see the halacha down there on the bottom. That if you have a piece of meat anywhere on the femur, you touch it anywhere, the whole thing becomes tameh. You don't need a kazayis, a file is enough. Then the whole thing becomes tameh. So now, once again, we have to understand how Rav is working this. What is this femur? Is the femur a protector, like we just saw the guy says, that there's a lot of bone marrow in there, so it's protecting the bone marrow, or is the femur acting as a handle? Same question as we had before. We saw a machlokes, whether you need a kazayis meat on it or a foil on it, which is much less. But what's going on here? Ibiyad, if we're talking about a handle, kashik seifa. Why does a achirim say that you need a foil? A foil is enough. Rav says you need a whole kazayis for the handle to work. And achirim are saying no. You see, it says in the chart, achirim kefoil. You need a little bean's worth of meat. Rav says it's not enough for a handle. For a handle, you need a kazayis. And ibishoimer, and if you're talking about a protector, kashiresha. So now you're going to have a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you need a kazayis. And over here, and Rav says all you need is a kefoil when it comes to a shomer. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say you need a kazayis? So you're going to have a question either on Rabbi Yehuda or on achirim. So the same type of answer we had a second ago. Either it's talking about a handle and he's going to hold like Rabbi Yehuda, or we're going to say it's talking about a shomer and he holds like acher. And again, so Rabbi Yochanan says you could have a handle that's less than a kazayis, and for shomer you don't need anything at all. So what is Rabbi Yochanan going to say? Rabbi Yochanan kula b'shomer, we're talking about a handle, a protector, and a protector. And a acherim say the size of a foil. You don't need a kazayis. Foil. It's a protector. What do you mean, a foil? Acherim, hakapoil amrim. Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says you don't need any shear. And also now you're telling me he says you need the size of a bean, of a lava bean? No, you don't need the size of a lava bean. I did the Kalmar Tanakama Shiura. He just threw out a name. He called, what he meant to say is you don't need any shear. It could be the size of a needle. But he said the size of a lava bean because we're talking about I did the comment Tanakama Shiura. The Tanakama said a kazayis, so he said he threw out a foil, but he meant to say there's no shear. Amarava says Rava, I could prove to you that we're talking about a protector versus a handle. Why? Because we're talking about a chylus, a femur. Why did we pick from all bones in the body? Why did we pick a femur? Because a femur has a ton of bone marrow and it's a protector, not a handle. Great. Itmar Reb Chanina Omar Zeu Shir. The shomer is the size, is the smallest shear possible, full. Reb Yochanan Omar Ein Ze Shir. Full is not the shear, it's less than that, even a half a beam. Ein Ze Shir Vaktani Kefoil. It says Mefurish, and we're doing Chazarah now. It says the measurement is a lava beam, and you tell me there's no shear at all. I call Matana. He just threw out a name, but he didn't really mean that it has to be lava beam. It could be even smaller than a lava beam. Toshma. Oh, so now we're talking about halacha. What if you have a sharvet? This is a sharvet. I don't know, a pod. And there's no beans in it. It says like this. Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah mitar b'shel pol. If the bean inside is a lava bean, which is large, here I think we have some sort of picture here. Here we go. So you see on the left side is the foil. It's larger beans, lava, and the ones on the right are what I have here, or even smaller, or mine are smaller, kidneys. Okay. So he says, think about it logically. What's harder to wash off in a sink? Large beans or tiny beans? What's harder to wash? Small beans. So therefore, I need a protector for the smaller beans, not for the large beans. Because if the small beans get dirty, it's very, very difficult for me to wash them off. So I need a protector. So he says, Mitar b'shel pol. He says that this is not really acting as a protector, so it's tar if it gets tummy. Why? Because it's large beans. But if you have very small beans, then this will act as a protector, and it's part of the beans, and it becomes tummy. Why? So the Gemara is going to talk about this word for a few minutes. Mashmishon means mishmosh. What does mishmosh mean? To touch. He doesn't want people to touch the beans. They'll get dirty. But there's another way to use the word. And the other way to use the word is shimush, like a usage, not to touch, but usage. So the Gemara is going to say, oh, so what do you see over here? You see that the shear is much less than a foil. The shear is even tiny amount. A little tiny kitness is also mikabaton. No, we're not talking about a shimer. We're talking about a handle. How does this act as a handle? If you have many of them, almost like grapes, this is the handle. You see this, I'm holding it up here. We're not talking about a shimer, but we're talking about a handle. How's that a handle? How do you have a handle with these guys? So here, you could see over here in the tree, they grow. It's actually hadama. We found that this is hadama. I guess it grows in some sort of bush. You grab one stem and there's a bunch of them attached to it. So if we're talking about a handle, what does it mean to touch? No, it doesn't mean to touch. It means bitashmishon, the usage. How are you going to use it? You're going to hold it like this and you're going to grab it all. Toshma. It says the word zera 3 times. So the last one, Yizarea, is extra. We had it the other day. That's how people plant. They plant wheat with the shell, with the what is it called? The shaft, whatever it's called. In other words, the shear is very, very small. You see, even in adasha, a small little bean. Says Gemara, don't bring me right from here. Bria shani. Sometimes when you have a full being, how do you say bria? Creature. Like an ant. An ant is a bria. It's a full being. It's a full entity. How come you're over, I forgot what it is, six lavim or 8 when you eat an ant? Why? It's not a gazayis. Yeah, the whole Torah you have to have a gazayis. Matzah is a gazayis. Nevela is a gazayis. They're a gazayis. Because it's a bria. It's a full entity. So Mela, this little guy, whatever it's, what happened to them? This little guy that I took out of my pod is a full creation. It's a whole thing. It's like a full apple, just a mini. So that's why you're over. Don't bring me a raya from Adashin. Boyer of Shaya. Okay, easy stuff now. Daf Kuf Yud Tes Amud Beis. Boy Rabbi Shaya. Shnei shomer ma'ushi yitztarfu. This is a shomer. This is a protector of the beans. The two of them combine together, so you have a whole shear of a kibetza, and then it's susceptible to tumah. Hey Chidami, what's the Gemara's question? If you're talking about peels, here you have different peels. This is a shomer, right? You agree with me that this is a shomer? This protects the onion, and look how many layers, right? So the Gemara says it's 3 layers of onion. Here, I'll show it to you right here. Beautiful. Can't do better than this. That's 1, that's 2, and that's 3. Now, logically speaking, the one that's closest to the inside of the onion, it's more part of the onion. The further away you go, it's less part of the onion. If you're talking about layers, literal layers, there's 2 options. You're talking about 2 different shomrim, 2 different ones. Can you combine them? Or there's the other option that you're talking about, can layers of an onion combine for the shear of a kibetza? So it can't be that. Why? Is there such a thing as a shomer on top of another shomer? What's a shomer? A guard, a protector. Is there such a thing as a guard on top of a guard, a shomer on top of a shomer? But not Rabbi Yehuda shalosh klipos b'basel. So there's 3 layers on an onion. Klimis ben shleima ben gedura mitzarefes. The inner one, the one you see here on the screen, the white, which is the closest to the onion. So even if it has holes in it, it's part of the onion. Emtsais, but once you go one step away, then only if it's shleima mitzarefes, if it's whole, then it combines with the onion. Gedura, if it has holes in it, a mitzarefes. Chitzayna, this ugly peel, this hard one, this, even if it's whole, it's not part of the onion. So, what do you see from here? That shomer, agabi shomer, one guard on top of the other guard, when it's one entity, you don't combine them. Rav Shaya, so obviously, if that's what he's talking about, what's the question? It's not mitzvah. You see over not mitzvah. So he's talking about if you take this shomer, you take this thing and you cut it in half. You go like this. Now you have 2 halves. Could you combine them together? Or if you have two small fruit, 2 nuts, 2 walnuts that are tiny, do they combine to kazais or to kibetza? What's the question? Kiven the hailu maganahai. This one on the right hand does not protect the one on the left, and the one on the left does not protect the one on the right. So therefore, yes, the shomrim, but they're by themselves, so they don't combine. No, each one is a protector, so they could combine. Tashma, if you have, we said, if you have a protector, you have a pot, and inside there's only one pile, that's not a protector. Why? Because pile, you're not concerned that it's going to get dirty. But if it's a small thing, it's now, how, if you have one tiny little bean in here, how's this considered a protector? But there's only one little bean. Obviously, you're bringing more of these guys together, and together you have a whole kibetza. No, we're not talking about a shomer. Over there in that case, we're talking about a handle. And how's the handle? We're talking about a handle that you grab from a stem. Yes, you're talking about beans, but we're talking about a lot of beans together with the handle, and that's hilchas handle, not hilchas shomer. But why does he use the word to touch? As we answered on Nomadal, betashmishon, not to touch, it means to use. Tashma, ton of the Rebbe Shmuel, al kol zer zerua shei zerua, kedersh b'nei adam etzim l'zriya chidu b'klibas v'zar b'klibas. We had this on Nomadal, Chazarah. That what you're talking about one piece of grain from the wheat. Usar b'klibas v'dazar b'klibas. So you see that how are you going to get to a kibetza with these chita? The only way to do it is if you mitzaref them, you take a bunch of them and you mitzaref them. Just like we said before, twice, that we're talking about the handle. Through the handle, that's more of a halach of a handle, not a shomer. Over here also, we're not talking about the Shomer. I'm sorry, we're talking about the stalk, and we're dealing with protectors. What does that mean? That each grain of wheat is protecting another grain. And therefore, they can combine together because each one is a protector to the other guy. So says Gemara, I don't understand. You have to make a distinction between the upper ones and the lower ones. Because the upper ones need to come onto the lower ones. If you remove the lower one, the Gemara understands, if you remove a lower piece of wheat, the top ones will fall down. But the bottom guy, he doesn't need the upper guy. So why is he mitzdaref with the upper guy? Or why is the upper guy mitzdaref with him? Says the Gemara, B'chadara, we're not talking about upper and lower, we're talking about one level of wheat. I wish I had a wheat with me. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Oh, here. Here, it's in the video. B'chadara. Interesting. If you take one down from the bottom, the top will fall. B'chadara means one row. B'chadara. The one row protects each other. But as Gemara Mika Kibeitza Achlam B'chadara. We're talking about to get to a whole egg's worth. How do you have a whole egg's worth of wheat on one little row? Says Gemara, Bechita de Shem ben Shedach. In the time of Shem ben Shedach, the wheat was enormous. Says Gemara, Hashdas is lachi. Once you're telling me that the wheat is that large, so then even if it's one kernel alone, you don't need a whole row. Even one alone is the size of a kibbetza. Gufa. This Givaldic case that we had, that a guy has two bones, and in each bone there's a half a kazayas of meat, and you left it outdoors, but the bone went inside, extended inside, and the whole house becomes tamei. And he put both heads of the wheat into the house, and the house is an oil, it's a roof on top of it. The whole house is tummy. Yehuda ben Akai Omer, Mishum Rabbi Yaakov. I don't understand. How you can't take two halves and make it a one? We're talking about a bone, that a bone is a handle. Aval nima, but a hair loyhaviyad. Hairs are not a handle. A hair could be a handle. You have a piece of hide. That there's a piece of meat on the other side. So let's say this is skin, and there's here. Let's call this a piece of meat. Great. Oh, perfect. Here you have a piece of skin and a piece of meat, and this is a hair. And the hair is touching this way. Great. What's the case? If you touch a string made out of flesh, or one hair that's touching the skin on the other side, tame. It's a conduit for tumah. Because this hair, if I grab it, the whole thing will lift up through the hair. You can see the hair on the video? I don't know. Okay. This hair is a protector. As the Gemara, but look, this hair is on top of the skin. First you have a layer of skin, then the meat. The meat is over here, and this skin, and then you have hair. So it's hair, skin, meat. That's a shomer on top of a shomer. This is one shomer, the hair. This is the second shomer, the skin. Says the Gemara, this hair actually doesn't stop over here, it goes through the skin. You can see it on both sides. Says Gemara, if it's true that hair goes through and through, how do you write tefillin? How do you write tefillin? You have to have a complete whole writing. If every piece of cloth microscopically has hair holes in it, then every time you write a letter on it, it's going to dip into that little hole, and it's going to be incomplete letters. So the Gemara says, you missed out what they say in Eretz Yisrael. Call Nekev and in Nekev, if you could cover it with the ink, it's not considered a hole because the ink covers it and fills it up. And some say the hair is a problem of a handle, not a shomer. These here in this picture of wheat, you see the wheat has like hairs to it. So we're talking about the hairs on some grain. Just like over there, he's talking about it's not just one hair; it's many hairs. Over here, also we're talking about many hairs. Many hairs are different. If you, as the Gemara is going to say, if you try to pick up a head of an animal by one hair, what's going to happen? The head will detach, and you'll be left with one hair. So one hair is not enough. But when you grab it with many hairs, I once read that each hair could hold 800 grams or something. So you could lift up a human being by their beard, basically. If you grab like 2,000 hairs, you could lift somebody up. Why? Because together, when Klal Yisrael gets together, the achtos of Klal Yisrael, you could lift up tremendous things. One person at a time, one thing at a time is not enough. So, sorry, we're talking about not one hair, but many hairs. That's the handle, Shabbat. It's a handle. You're asking me, what kind of handle is it? It's one little hair. It's going to rip off. It's many hairs. Where do you see this? It says, the hairs that we see in this picture over here, these little hairs, Tumah goes through them, Tumah comes out of them. But they're not part of the wheat. What can you do with the hair? It's not one hair, it's many hairs. And some say, we're not talking about a handle, we're talking about a protector. Because if you're going to tell me that we're talking about a handle here, you can't have a handle that's only one hair. What kind of handle is that? No, the answer is we're talking about many hairs. Where do we say? This is just Chazarah again. It's not the hair on the grain, Tumah goes into the grain, and out of the grain if the grain was Tameh. They don't combine to the grain. But the question is, what can you do with one hair? We're talking about many hairs. So by hair also, we're talking about many hairs, and that's why it could be a yad, it could be a handle. Rabbi Sai, have a wonderful day, and Mazel Tov to David Sai.
Merit the schus of spreading Torah throughout the world. Sponsor a shir today. MDYsponsor.com or sponsor at MDY.com.